Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at independent agencies of the executive branch of the federal government. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson, scroll down the correct section, and get ready to fill in the blanks that coincide with the presentation as far as content. Please also remember to answer any key concept questions that happen to appear throughout or at the end of the notes section. Please remember that you can play any part of this presentation for detailed clarity or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. This is independent agencies. Independent agencies are created by Congress and are independent of the executive departments, or cabinet-level departments if you will. Additionally, there are over 150 independent agencies in the executive branch. Essentially, the heads of the agencies are appointed by the president directly, but of course they have to be approved by the Senate first. So in many ways, this is similar to cabinet-level heads or secretaries. Now, we're going to look at several key types of independent agencies of the executive branch, starting of course with the Environmental Protection Agency, which was founded in 1970. Established by an executive order by President Nixon, the EPA makes and enforces pollution regulations and conducts research on environmental problems. Additionally, while the EPA is often given cabinet status by most presidents, it is an independent agency fully. So it does exist as its own separate entity too, although it does have and wield executive power. There's some other examples of this type of structure with its own system of execution rules. The Federal Reserve System, for example, the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, Social Security Administration, the Peace Corps, the National Transportation Safety Board, or the NTSB, Selective Service, and the Office of Personnel Management, and General Services Administration, or the GSA. All these other examples of independent agencies in many ways function like the EPA, where they take up key issues and try their best to essentially enforce and regulate the laws of the land to help out with that said domain issue or topic. Let's go ahead and now look at more about independent agencies. Established in 1949, the GSA, or General Services Administration, manages and supports all the federal agencies. Essentially, their job is to manage government buildings, real estate, and websites. They provide products for federal agencies, including managing the fleet of vehicles for the agencies too. This, of course, is really important. Now let's go ahead and focus on regulatory agencies and commissions. These are the types of independent agencies that set and enforce standards or rules. Essentially, we're talking about, of course, the Interstate Commerce Commission, which was the first one established, the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Trade Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. All these types of agencies and commissions, like I said before, essentially enforce the standards or rules of the land. Now let's go ahead and talk about the civil service. The civil service of the executive branch is essentially the workforce that makes up the departments and agencies of the federal government. So essentially we're talking about the people behind the bureaucracy. Now, their main job is not dependent on the president, and they remain employed when a new president is inaugurated. So in many ways that is good, so that we don't have a layover or turnover of different people trying to learn and assume the position. Also, in terms of the civil service system, the civil service system is the method by which the people are hired. You see, people must be qualified for the job itself. They can't just be appointed by their best friends in government. Qualification is determined by a civil service exam, which must be taken. The system was established by the 1883 Pendleton Act to stop the spoil system, which essentially used to work, like I said before, where people in power would appoint their best friends for government positions even if they weren't qualified. A little good history here helps us understand why this is a thing. The spoil system is when the winning political party gives all the civil service jobs to their supporters. Workers did not have to be qualified for the job, thus leaving, of course, huge deficits of competency in a president's administration. This, of course, increased corruption and scandal, and also led to instability within the government and inefficiency too. So when a new party came into power, everyone was fired and all new people were hired. This, of course, caused mass confusion. Now let's go ahead and focus on the Office of Personnel Management. So the Office of Personnel Management was created in 1978. And additionally, this is an independent agency that manages the civil service system and oversees all of its practices. They're in charge of hiring federal employees and administering civil service exams too. They oversee qualifications for employment, and additionally, they handle the salaries, retirements, and benefits for federal employees. Now let's go ahead and look at government corporations. So government corporations are essentially where the United States government owns some businesses, like actively owns some businesses and oversees their day-to-day operations, like Amtrak and the Post Office and the FDIC, which is, of course, for Federal Deposit Insurance Corporations, which ensures that your deposits are safe and secure should a bank go under, and also even the TVA, or the Tennessee Valley Authority, which dates back to the times of the New Deal and FDR. There's also other parts of the executive branch too. The executive branch also pertains to the executive office. And when I say the executive office, of course, I'm referring to the White House office itself and the immediate staff of the president too. Now, essentially, the executive office is overseen by the White House chief of staff, who's essentially the head person, and some would say the real number two to the president. Essentially, they report directly to the president, and they're under his or her control and domain. Now, it's important to note that these people in these positions don't require Senate approval to assume these said positions. In terms of other parts of the executive branch too, let us not forget about the Council of Economic Advisors as well, as they advise the president on the nation's economy, and might play a key role if, of course, the U.S. economy is headed towards a recession, or, of course, if there's growth on the horizon too, and ways to, of course, help that growth and lead to American prosperity. The Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, is also really important too, which assists the president in budget planning. As you can imagine, the federal government needs a lot of money allocated for special programs and services to help out the American people, and also to lead up the actual implementation of the laws that are designed by the legislative and have to be enforced by and overseen by the executive. Of course, let's not forget about the National Security Council too, or the NSC, which advises the president on the nation's defense. As you can imagine, we live in a world where, of course, suppressing threats from abroad or within is really important, and so having this type of group that's a key part of the executive branch that advises and helps the president is of the utmost importance. So as you guys can see, there are so many executive agencies in the executive branch of the federal government, but I think you can also see why they're so essential and key, because a president can't just do it all by him or herself. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.